Israel and Hamas conflict and how those hostages ended up dead under Israeli fire. Let's bring in senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, Mark Regev. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. Our deepest condolences for this very latest loss that Greg Palkot just reported on. Can you tell us anything about how this young woman died?
I don't have more details at this stage. I apologize. It's clear that she's unfortunately not the first person who was abducted on that terrible October day, on October 7th, and taken back to Gaza forcibly by the Hamas terrorists. She's one of a series of people that were abducted and have died since. And, of course, everyone today is especially saddened in Israel by the fact that we had the three hostages who were inadvertently, accidentally, tragically killed by the Israeli forces. A terrible thing. You know, in all conflict, there's always the danger of friendly fire. Anyone who's been in the military in close quarter conflict, fighting with the enemy, there's always the chance, unfortunately, of friendly fire. And this is even worse because these people weren't armed, they weren't soldiers, and they were tragically and inadvertently killed. It really is a terrible situation.
Well, let me follow up on that, Ambassador, because there's reports now that these three young men were waving a white flag. They were speaking and yelling in Hebrew. I know there's an investigation underway, but what have you heard so far about what went wrong here?
So it's not clear, and we have to thoroughly get to the bottom of what happened, because obviously we want to do our best that it will never be repeated. But it was a combat zone in the specific area where they were surrendering. They'd been fighting before. There was fighting following that. And it's clear that our forces misidentified these three individuals. They were identified as a threat, as Hamas terrorists. And as you know, the Hamas terrorists don't wear uniforms necessarily. They routinely dress in civilian clothing. There have been numerous examples of them trying to trick our soldiers, speaking Hebrew and so forth. And in the height of battle and the pressure of combat, our soldiers on the ground, obviously, as I said, misidentified them and tragically killed them. Now, this has to be thoroughly investigated. And if there are lessons to learn, we have to learn those lessons.
So
Please.
Sorry, let me just ask you, your colleague Tal Heinrich was on our channel just a short while ago, and she said that there is a very highly charged atmosphere in Israel right now, obviously because of these three young men that were killed accidentally, it seems. Let me ask you about the families of the hostages who have been putting a lot of pressure on this government to make a deal, to cut a deal with Hamas and bring everyone home alive. It seems to me that you've had the most success when you were back at the negotiating table. I want you to listen to this family member who just spoke a short while ago. They held a rally and they held a press conference pressuring the government to act.
The Israeli government needs to be active. They need to put an offer on the table, including prisoners with blood on their hands, and put the best offer on the table to get the hostages back alive.
So, Ambassador, it sounds like you're sending people back to Qatar. So are negotiations about to start again?
So I'm not at liberty to go into that sort of detail. I can say the following. We will do everything that is possible to bring our hostages home and alive. That's our goal. But we're dealing with a brutal, fanatical, cruel, inhumane enemy in Hamas. And they're not going to suddenly release our hostages because they've become humanitarians or they've decided to honor the rules of war and international humanitarian law. That's not who we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who behead, who burn people alive, who massacre, who killed parents in front of their children and children in front of their parents, and who've killed a number of the hostages already, as you just reported. A young woman was murdered by them. And so we believe, as President Biden has said, that Hamas responds to pressure. And we think that by keeping the military pressure on Hamas, we're actually expediting the freeing of our hostages. That's what happened in the past. Hamas didn't agree to release hostages until they were under significant and strong military pressure.
Right. Okay, Ambassador, and senior advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you so much, Mark Regev, for joining us. We appreciate it. Our deepest condolences.